Good afternoon, dear Arancha. How are you? Greetings from Bucharest.
Thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to be with you today, even if only virtually. Next time, I hope to be able to do it in person.
Absolutely. You have a standing invitation. I would like to welcome you to Bucharest as soon as possible. So, dear Minister, dear Arancha, dear Ambassador, dear colleagues, it is my great honor and pleasure to open this session by welcoming the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Spain, Mrs. Arancha Gonyález Laya. Romania and Spain share a special relationship based on a strategic partnership, strong political and cultural affinities, a robust attachment to a world order based on rules and respect for international law, for humanist values and principles. And Spain is also home of one of the most important and largest Romanian communities abroad, which is very well integrated while maintaining substantial ties with the country of origin. And thank you so much, dear Minister, for that. As a new member, Spain can be considered a model of solidarity and a firm supporter of unity. It has also been one of the most extraordinary success stories of European integration, both in terms of political democratization and of economic and social development. So you are a true model for those who joined the EU later on, including for Romania. Dear Arancha, thank you for accepting this invitation to join our ambassadors at the annual meeting of the Romanian diplomacy. You are an expert in international relations and trade with more than 20 years of professional expertise. You have been appointed as Minister for Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of the Kingdom of Spain in January 2020. You have graduated in law from the University of Navarre with a PhD in European law from the Carlos III University of Madrid. You have extensive knowledge of international relations, trade and economics, a long track record in both public and private sectors, as well as the management of multilateral organizations. Before holding this position as Minister, you have been Executive Director of the International Trade Center, the Joint Development Agency of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization from September 2013 to January 2020. And previously, you've been holding the position of Chief of Staff to the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Pascal Lamy. And you've been heavily involved in setting up the initiative Aid for Trade, and you acted as representative of Sherpa of Mr. Lamy at the G20. You have had also positions within the European Commission, negotiation trade agreements with third countries and supporting developing countries in their efforts to promote trade and development. Between 2002 and 2004, you've been the European Commission spokesperson for trade and an advisor to the European Union Commissioner for Trade. You have started your career in the private sector as a partner at a law firm advising companies on matters related to trade, competition, and state aid. So, dear Arancha, your expertise is huge, and your voice is clearly heard in Spain and abroad as a passionate promoter of multilateralism and of the protection of human rights. You made development aid and cooperation one of the priorities of your mandate, and you speak firmly and diligently in favor of gender equality and empowerment of women. On this point, I'm happy to share with you that in the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we implement a very strong policy on gender equality, as half of our diplomats are women, many of them ambassadors or in management positions in the headquarters, and actually in the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs headquarters, we have more than 50% women in top management positions, including 2 out of 4 secretaries of state, the Secretary General and Undersecretary of State. Before giving you the floor, allow me to praise your work during the pandemic and thank you for the fruitful cooperation between our two countries at bilateral and European level during these challenging times. There are still difficult moments to come, we both suspect that, but through solidarity and mutual support we will succeed in restoring the well-being of our societies and economies. So the floor is yours, and we look forward to hearing from your experience as Minister in tackling this pandemic, but also from your vision on the international situation, considering the challenges faced by the European Union. So you have the floor. Thank you so much, Arancha.
Thank you very much, Minister, dear Bogdan. I am really humbled by your invitation to share with you what the world looks like, modestly, what the world looks like from where I sit in Madrid, a country that, as you know, has been hard hit by COVID, but a country that remains faithful to our moral obligation to ensure the response to COVID is not just one that helps our citizens in Spain, but also ensures solidarity and support so that others can also fight the pandemic. A response that also looks at responding to our businesses, to our citizens, and that we do this in the spirit of collaboration rather than in the spirit of confrontation. Before I start, obviously, someone has told me, Bogdan, that today is a good auspicious day for you. That is your birthday, and I want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I was hoping to blow candles together with you, but we'll do this when I manage to be with you next time.
Absolutely.
My starting point is that COVID, in a way, has accentuated a number of revolutions that were already underway before. And this is something we need to understand in order to provide a response that would provide safety and security to our citizens. Let me just briefly mention what these revolutions looked like. We were already in the middle of a technological revolution that was changing fundamentally the way we produce, the way we trade, but more importantly, the way we work, with huge implications for the place that work has in our economy, but also in our societies, which has only been accentuated during COVID, as we have seen in this very short 6 months. The second revolution that was already underway is the sustainability revolution. Demands from our citizens for better respect of our environmental boundaries, demand for protection of biodiversity, demand on governments from citizens that were very well organized to reduce the CO2 emissions in our economies. This also is something that we have seen with our eyes during the COVID, in that the absence of economic activities has brought to life what nature could look like if we really made an effort at decarbonizing. The third revolution is a much more geopolitical in nature, is a growing conflict in a much more multipolar world between two key actors for Europe. The US on one side, with whom Europe enjoys strong transatlantic bonds, but also a conflict with China, the country to the east that now has a much more prominent and assertive place in international affairs. Finally, another revolution that we sometimes overlook is what I call the democratic revolutions. More empowered citizens that demand change from our governments. They demand more respect for human rights. They don't tolerate that these violations take place. That demand that we tackle inequalities, that are not happy with the growing in-country inequalities. Yes, we've been very good in the last 30 years at reducing inequalities worldwide overall, but at the expense of growing in-country inequalities that our citizens are no longer ready to tolerate. So more empowered citizens have an ability to ask from governments that we change the situation. And if we don't, what happens is they rather join more populist movements that understand the problem, but are incapable of producing solutions beyond repeating very generic slogans. So in the middle of all of this comes this pandemic that reminds us of the the fact that we had not been able to provide very forceful responses to all these ongoing revolutions. During this pandemic, what Spain has been trying to do is build the short-term emergency response to the pandemic from the healthcare point of view, from the economic point of view, also from the geopolitical point of view, and I'll say a few words about that in a minute. But at the same time, we've also realized that it was important to invest with our partners, starting with the European Union, to build a new system of global governance that would help us build the resilience that our countries need for the future. So let me briefly share with you how we have managed the crisis from all these different points of view, starting with what has been central to the foreign ministry, which was taking care of the thousands of Spaniards that were scattered around the world. And on this one, let me thank you for the excellent cooperation that Spain has had with Romania to ensure that our citizens were supported by you and to provide you also with the support that you needed for Romanian citizens stranded in Spain. It's been, in our case, more than 40,000 Spaniards that we've been supporting to return back home, sometimes individually, very often through the EU solidarity mechanisms that were put in place. Another example of how important is the European Union in terms of crisis. We've also put in place a system of temporary housing, some sort of B&B for Spaniards that were stranded abroad through the solidarity of Spaniards living abroad. We've also set up a mechanism to support border crossing for businesses, for students, for researchers that have been caught in this nightmare of multiple regulations that countries took to fight the pandemic. We've also had to become, in a way, purchasing agents, quote unquote, for our healthcare systems, facilitating contacts with third countries to purchase material, equipment, vaccine, medicines, and so on and so forth. Big on our side has been the economic response that we've provided to businesses through the approval of liquidity and loans for businesses that had seen their economic activities collapse, through temporary schemes, employment schemes for over 3 million Spaniards that lost their jobs as a result of COVID, through a universal income for Spaniards at the bottom of the pyramid to ensure that longer term we'll be able to eliminate poverty in our society, and with a specific packages of support for sectors like tourism that for us represent over 12% of our GDP, so a sector that means a lot to our economy. So the response has been a whole of the government, with obviously foreign ministry playing an important pivotal role in all of this, given, like you, given the position and our ability to dialogue with countries around the world. We've also put a lot of effort into strengthening our healthcare, not only as a response to COVID, but also to invest in research and development of new vaccines and treatment for COVID, deploying financial support to the research institutes that at the moment are testing more than 12 different types of vaccines that we hope will give us the response in the short term. Part of what we've done was national. A big part of what we did was also at the European level, working together with you and together with your teams to build the EU Recovery Fund response that has been so important at stabilizing the economic outlook of Europe, giving a signal not only to our citizens and to our businesses that we cared about them, but also giving a message to the rest of the world that Europe was managing its crisis in a different way from what we managed in 2008, where we left millions of our citizens behind, and also those that had doubts about our ability to give ourselves a response that not only are we capable of fixing our problems, but that we have geopolitical ambitions. This is why this recovery fund is not only about economic response, it is also about, it's a reflex of the the geopolitical ambitions that Europe has in international affairs. We have also had in this period, together with you and the rest of the European Union member states, provide a response to a lot of tensions that have been building in our borders. We have been giving a response to the tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean, tensions between Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus, promoting and pursuing always dialogue and negotiations as a means to solve the differences that these three players have, and in particular Turkey and Greece have. More recently, we've had to also respond, we are in the midst of responding forcefully to events in Belarus, where we see aggression, we see a failed electoral process, but more importantly, aggression against and repression with civilians being subject to incredible forms of violence that we do not tolerate in Europe. We in Spain are very clear that on Belarus we have no geopolitical ambitions. This is not about Belarus becoming a member of the European Union or becoming a member of NATO, or this is not for us a geopolitical fight. It is very clearly for us a fight, a support for those in Belarus that are fighting for values that are dear to us in the European Union, values that we know are very dear because we also have known in our lifetimes a world that did not respect those same values and those same rights. We've had to also respond to the turbulences in the Sahel and in particular in Mali. Sahel, for us in Spain, we see this as one of our biggest geopolitical dangers to the European Union, with a combination of absence of a state and state institutions, and a proliferation of criminal and illicit activities from terrorism to human trafficking that is at the heart of a lot of the irregular migration we are seeing, or drug trafficking. In this list also I have Libya, important to the European Union. It's in the central Mediterranean. It's a country that has been suffering from incredible instability and conflict, and where Spain has been promoting an intra-Libyan dialogue as a means for them to resolve their differences without external interference. I mentioned this as some of the crisis management situations we've had to deal with in the vicinity of the European Union while we were fighting against COVID, which shows that in a way Europe can not only deal with its own issues, but also ensure that we bring a bit more peace and stability around our borders. This has been a lot of the crisis management mode, but there is also a longer-term building of governance that we think is important. The theme that we use in Europe is a strategic autonomy, so maybe I'll give you a sense of what a strategic autonomy means for us in Spain. We certainly don't see strategic autonomy as autarky. We do not see this as Europe closing its borders and hiding behind high walls. We want to continue to foster open trade, economic and investment relations. We also want to give a signal that there are obviously legal paths to migration. We want an open innovation. So we are not seeing a strategic autonomy as a means to close ourselves behind borders, but rather as a means to strengthen our ability to be rule shaper, rule maker in the world, rather than simply be rule taker, being in a position where somebody else defines the rules and Europe has to follow. That is our concept of a strategic autonomy. This is why for us, the strategic autonomy is not only about defense. Yes, it is about defense, and we express it through our strong partnership in NATO, also through a strengthening complementary ability of the EU and capacities of the EU in the defense field. But we also think we need to define better strategic autonomy in the economic field, in the industrial area, in trade space, which lacks in this economy of the 21st century that requires bigger size and bigger muscle, where Europe suffers somehow from a fragmentation. So Spain very much looks at the discussion on the new European industrial policy, new European industrial champions, as a means to express our strategic autonomy. And for the same reason, we think it has to be European industry, not just German industry or Franco-German industry, but a European industry that is capable of making the investments, whether it's on 5G, whether it's on the hydrogen economy, whether it's on the vehicle of the future, will be able to develop and deploy the necessary muscle. The third dimension of how we look at a strategic autonomy has to do with innovation, research, development, a capacity of the incredible brains of the Europeans, not only to invent, but also to ensure the innovations and inventions can be brought to market and then can be, through that, monetized. The biggest challenge we see in this area of innovation is not the lack of European brains, we have quite a few, but the inability of Europe to fully exploit, fully market this innovative spirit of our European researchers. This is why we think a big test case of this strategic autonomy is Europe's investment into vaccines and treatment for COVID, which in a way speaks of the ability of the EU to leverage the talent of our research institutions, but not only that, put in place the mechanisms that would help us translate these vaccines or treatment into production, and not only into production, but also into distribution, and not only in Europe, but also across the world, because we have learned that nobody will be safe until we are all safe. This is why we are very strongly supporting also the International Alliance on Vaccines and Treatment. Strategic autonomy for us has to go hand in hand with reforming and strengthening multilateralism in all its dimensions, doing this in the lowest hanging fruit, which is the trade one in the World Trade Organization, but not only that, doing also this in the World Health Organization, where we've put very concrete proposals to strengthen the ability of the organization to help us prepare for pandemics with common protocols, to help us to be a bit the canary in the mine that identifies the problem before it becomes one, that has the ability to tell countries what is being done right and what is not being done right, so with a bit of autonomy. So Strengthening multilateralism is a theme that is going to be very dear to us as we move forward. And the reason why we are doing this is not because we are some sort of naive country or because we are all of a sudden softy, quote unquote, but rather because we understand that what matters today is the management of our interdependence. It's not independence, it's management of our interdependence, whether it's on trade, whether it's on health, whether it's on chemical weapons, whether it's on environment. The challenge is managing our interdependence. We can't build walls to hide behind. So the answer can only be managing this interdependence. Now, as a medium-sized country with a middle-of-the-road position, pretty much like Romania is internationally, we know that managing interdependence would be better served if we have a strong multilateral system, and would be much more complicated if we are left to fight this battle on our own, if it is the law of the jungle that prevails. This is why we are strong defenders, and we will be strong defenders of multilateralism, and we will pursue this with all our strength. Two small points to conclude this interaction, and then obviously be ready to engage into the more questions and answers part. There is two pieces of work we are working on at the moment. Number one is defining our own external action strategy, presenting what and building on what this strategic autonomy looks like from where we sit, with very clear investments in prevention, in resilience building, which we hope to be ready with in the autumn. The second piece we are working on is also a research piece with a group of international experts that would look at the global order and technology. Technology is having an incredible impact in foreign relations, in our global order, not only on the economic side or on the governance of technology, but also on fighting against terrorism, but also on the governance of work, and what we want to do, or in the protection of human rights that are being attacked very often through the space, or on the fighting against cybercrime. So what we're doing at the moment is looking at the intersections between the global order and technology, in the hope of putting forward a few proposals that we hope Europe could champion in the coming years. Finally, I want to tell you that as a Mediterranean country that we are going to be making strong investments in the peace, security and stability of the Mediterranean, and in particular on the southern neighborhood of the European Union. In November, on the 27th, we will be celebrating 25th anniversary of the Union for the Mediterranean. We will be inviting all members of the family to join us in celebrating the 25th anniversary, but more importantly, in defining together what we want this Union for the Mediterranean to look like in the next 25 years. And back to back with this, we would hope to have a conversation with also the European Union and the members of the southern neighborhood about how do we inject more political energy into the southern neighborhood of the European Union, one that we think is as important as it is fragile, and one that we think together we need to nurture. So, Bogdan, this by means of an overview of what we've been trying to do the 6 months, but also how we've been investing in building a system for the future that would be more protective of all our citizens, and through that contribute to the discussions at the European Union level. And now more than happy to engage in a dialogue with you.
Thank you so much, dear Arancha, for this very inspiring presentation and for this overview of the challenges that we face today. We very much share the same view about the meaning of strategic autonomy, which does not equal with autarky. And I think we have to discuss more at the level of the European Union about the proper definition of this term. We use this term, we use also the term of strategic sovereignty of the European Union. But I think many of us, we use these terms with different meanings. And in any way, I think we have to convince also other colleagues that having a developed strategic autonomy or sovereignty of the Union does not mean that we have to abandon the transatlantic relationship, but to the contrary, that we need to work together, the both sides of the Atlantic, to mitigate the problems and to solve them and to have a constructive approach towards that, because it is the same community, in fact, of values and prosperity and security. And I also very much support, and this is one of the lessons learned from our experience of the pandemic, that we do need more efficient multilateralism. We do need to manage better our interdependencies. We cannot solve our problems in isolation, that's for sure. And even if the pandemic has stopped some of our links, at the same time we are more and more interdependent, and this is obvious. And last but not least, I fully share your view on the southern neighborhood. Of course, we are here very close to the eastern neighborhood of the European Union, but we do share the view that we need to give proper attention to what happens in the south, because it is, well, in our direct interest as far as our security is concerned, but not only. And you have mentioned Belarus. Speaking of violations of human rights, this morning our ambassador to Minsk, upon my instructions, has joined some of his EU colleagues and paid a visit to one of the prominent Belarusian opposition representatives, Svetlana Alexievich, Nobel Literature Prize winner, to make sure that human rights are respected. And I think we have to continue to pressure on the regime in order to open the dialogue with the opposition and not the ways of repression. And now I have the pleasure to close the public part of this session.